Welcome to the Ticktective podcast and video series, a program of the Bay Area Lyme Foundation, where our mission is to make Lyme disease easy to diagnose and simple to cure. I'm your host, Leah Gertner, Director of Education and Outreach. Lyme disease is the most common vector-borne disease in the USA and is a global issue. This show includes interviews with the researchers we fund, as well as other interesting people in the Lyme scientific community. We are a nonprofit foundation based in Silicon Valley. Thanks to a generous grant that covers all of our overhead, 100% of all donations go directly to support research and prevention programs. You can find out more or donate at bayarealyme.org. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dan Wolff, aka Tickman Dan.
Thank you for having me, Leah. It's really a pleasure. I've respected your organization for a long time, and I'm really excited to be here with you today.
Great. Dan Wolff is the founder and president of TickEase, the only patented CDC-compliant two-sided tweezer created expressly for removal of embedded ticks from people and pets. TickEase is a preferred prevention partner of the University of Rhode Island's Tick Encounter Resource Center. TickEase also works with TickReport.com, a tick testing company formerly associated with the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Dan Wolff received his Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from Skidmore College. So Fauci was at your bar mitzvah.
Yeah, actually, it's an interesting story. My dad was formerly the director for the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. I grew up in Washington. I was actually born at the Naval Hospital in Bethesda, Maryland. So my dad interviewed and hired Tony, and then they became best friends. And my dad was at both Tony's weddings as best man. And my dad, who's passed away now for quite some time, they were tight. And the last two times that I did see Tony in person was at my bar mitzvah in 1977, when we left DC and moved to Boston just before, and then unfortunately at my dad's funeral in 1994. So the connection was very, very tight and close for many years, and I still have the good fortune to be able to speak with Tony on occasion.
Have you been able to speak with him about Lyme disease?
I did. I actually sent him the tool, but being a very high-level government official, he had to be very careful with what he was doing with that so that it doesn't appear as a conflict as far as promoting a product. But he did send me around to some other people within the federal government, because I think this would be a good item to have: Health and Human Services, forestry departments, that kind of thing. So we are investigating and pursuing, trying to get the product available through these government agencies.
I'd love to hear about how you came into the tick prevention, tick bite, tick removal world.
Well, yes, and that's an interesting story that I have. I started enjoying the outdoors many years ago. I would say probably between 25 and 30 years at this point. In Massachusetts. And at that time, we were just starting to experience a rapid growth in wildlife populations, particularly deer in the suburban areas. And spending a lot of time outdoors, I also, besides noticing this increase in wildlife, I started to notice an increase in tick activity. And this was really at the beginning of the explosion of Lyme disease, but in general, tick-borne diseases. So, fast forward a few years from the beginning, and now we are inundated. I mean, we have an overabundance of deer, coyotes, raccoons. I mean, it's like wild kingdom out here now, where when I was growing up in the same area, we never really saw quite as many of these types of critters running around. So now we have the hosts and the vehicle for ticks to spread. And then I also have noticed that over the years, we've seen a gradual trend in warmer winters and in some cases wetter years, which will create also a good environment for ticks to thrive. So I found myself maybe about 15 years ago as a divorced single dad with two dogs. spending a lot of time outdoors, and I was getting hammered with ticks, pretty much all deer ticks at that time. And I was very concerned because we would find them everywhere. I'd find them in my bed. I mean, I'd pull my sheets that, of course, the dogs had brought them in, and my kids were starting to get them. And I was very concerned. So I started to do some research, and I was looking online and said, well, how do you remove these things properly? And everybody I saw, my research pointed towards, pun intended, a fine tip tweezer for proper removal of ticks from, mainly from people, and removing those small ticks like you mentioned. I happen to have here some of the ticks you were talking about. I don't know if you can really see those, but these are nymphal stage deer ticks. And you can see just how tiny those are. So a lot of people that are experiencing tick-borne illnesses actually never recall getting bitten. Some people like myself get I'm glad I get a reaction to the tick bite, which is a red, itchy welt. And this seems to occur no matter what size the tick that bites me is. So, the research was showing me fine tip tweezers. And when I went to look for tick tweezers, I couldn't find anything. I was finding something called the tick key, which I think you're familiar with. And I was finding something called the ticked off, which is commonly referred to as the tick spoon. And I had nymphal ticks on me, and I couldn't get them off with that. As a matter of fact, what I was doing was I was either, and I'll show you here when a tick is biting you, I was either pulling it sideways, which would really do nothing more than just kind of pull this mouth part out, or people wanted to twist it, when I was told that lifting straight up is really the best method. So it's not rocket science. I'm not going to claim to be any kind of super genius here. I said in my mind I was going to make a better tick removal tool, and the first thing I did right here in my basement was model the TickEase out of a piece of tinfoil. And that's how it all started. So it's one of those stories where, oh yeah, I made this in my basement out of tinfoil, and which is the case. So this is the final product. It's unique in that it's a two-sided tool. So this would be the scoop side, which takes into consideration the use of the slotted removal method. This works great on my dogs and on animals when particularly you have like those big dog ticks or large engorged deer ticks. And if it's in a very easily accessible area, this works great. But the better side for smaller ticks would be the if you can see that, the sharp tweezer side. And again, it's not rocket science, just combining the two methods that were available. And I know the CDC could be a hot point for some of our viewers and listeners, but I strongly believe that looking strictly at their recommendation for tick removal, they did get that one right. And I'll leave the other parts out for other people to discuss if they're interested. So I've been bitten more than 225 times. I've estimated by deer ticks. I've never, to my knowledge, contracted officially or tested positive for a tick-borne illness. So I don't know why. I feel blessed and lucky. I know plenty of people that have been bitten once and basically their lives are ruined. So my whole mission here is to create a product or products that will help people, to educate people about ticks behavior. That's my specialty. I stick with my little area of knowledge, which is how they behave in the life cycle and how that relates to wildlife and other hosts, including humans. So if I can help people and run a successful business at the same time, that's really my goal. So I've done a lot to get my information out there, to be Tickman Dan. My battle cry, don't neglect your crevices, make sure people are doing tick checks so they know how to do them properly. Make sure you know what to do when, little Johnny comes home and says, Mommy, what's this behind my ear? Answer the question, what do you do now? What do you do now? Well, that's important information, and it can actually result in prevention of disease. And if it can help, even one person with this terrible problem, then I'm happy. So I know that was a long answer, but that's the story in a nutshell of Tickman Dan.
Okay, Dan. So what do you do when you get bit by
What
a
do you do? Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that question. Well, there are a series of steps that you can take. And I've often said this, that tick-borne disease prevention is not doing one thing and then all of a sudden you've done everything to reduce your chances. There's a whole host of different things that you can do and different actions to take that could result in reducing your exposure as much as possible. So first of all, when you discover a tick, if it's behind your ear or wherever, I mean, ticks tend to migrate into warm, moist, soft tissue areas on your body. The first thing you want to do is get the tick off quickly and properly. So that's important because we all know that the longer a tick is actually attached, the more of your chance of being exposed to the microbes within that tick. They reside in the midgut of the tick, which is basically the abdomen. And you can see my shirt here. This is the soft part of the tick. And the microbes will migrate throughout that tick's body. They'll get up into the salivary glands, and the tick is spitting and sucking and spitting and sucking into the host. And that's how these microorganisms can be transferred into the host. And then once they get into the host, they'll need to get some sort of strong foothold and begin to multiply. And that's how the progression of onset of illness occurs. So proper and prompt removal is very important, number one. And I say proper because the thing about tick removal is that we have a lot of old ideas, just like everything else. You know, everybody had a different way of doing it way back when. Things are different now. And so we know that putting a lit cigarette on the butt of a tick and getting it to back out is not a recommended method for removal. And that's simply because if you think about it, if you look at the anatomy of this tick right there, and you can see this sharp single appendage, which is called the hypostome. It's a hollow tube, right? You see it coming from here. These are very sharp rear-facing barbs. And these two movable parts on the top of the hypostome are called chelicerae. And they actually move, they're movable in a saw-like fashion and kind of ratchet that the bulk of the hypostome into the skin. So it's stuck in there pretty good. And that's why twisting or coming over the tick and pulling it sideways is going to do nothing but weaken the connection between that mouth part and the main part of the tick. Ticks don't actually have heads. They're part of the arachnid family. And even though a larval tick comes out of the egg with 6 legs like an insect, when it transitions into a nymphal stage, it sprouts another pair of legs, and now it's officially a part of the spider family. So they don't actually have heads. They have these this abdomen and then these elongated mouth parts. And, you know, it looks pretty daunting when you see the tick and you say, oh my God, look at everything that can be left in the skin. Well, that's not necessarily true. These are called palps, and they're basically sheaths. So when the tick bites you, the sheaths open up and you have this single hypostome, and that's the only thing that gets embedded. Now, folks, I got to tell you, it's not the world's end if you leave that mouth part in. It acts as a dirty splinter and usually will work itself out. So the old way of thinking that, oh my God, I broke it off and now I'm going to die, it's not true. Once the body of the tick is removed, you're at no further risk of exposure. That's it. You've already been exposed as much as you can be. Now, prompt is important because, again, the longer the tick is attached, the more chance of getting infected or exposed to these pathogens is. However, because ticks can carry so many different types of infectious microbes, viruses, parasites, and bacteria, they all have very different transmission times. So when people say, oh, it wasn't attached for, for 24 hours, I can't get sick. Well, that may be the case for certain pathogens or certain bacteria, like what some research has shown with the Borrelia burgdorferi, which is Lyme. But the viral infections can take minutes, and other bacterial or parasitic infections can vary. So that argument doesn't go well with me. Always get it off promptly and properly. And a properly, again, would be to use a fine tip tweezer like this to go. Basically, you want to go straight down on the tick with the very tips, and you're going to pull straight up. You see, it's got my hair right there. So that's the easiest method. Couldn't be less complicated, just to pull.
You want to grab it by its mouth parts as close to your skin as possible and avoid squeezing the body, right? So you don't push the bacteria further from its guts into your skin. So you want to right close to your skin and the mouth parts.
Yes, right at where, if you can see where the hypostome meets the body of that tick, that's the perfect placement. This little brown shell here is a harder piece of the tick. This is an elastic, like a balloon on the abdomen. Anywhere below the scutum, which is the shell, is preferable, because not only does that cut off any possible liquid, or as I like to call it, yucky tick juice, from entering the skin at the moment you squeeze, it also does not allow you to squeeze the soft part of the tick. And this is where you can have problems with other types of removal techniques. And that would be to rupture, squeeze, or really agitate the tick in general with substances like Vaseline or alcohol or anything, because the tick can't just go like this and then get off. Like, ooh, yuck, you're poisoning me, I'm out of here. Doesn't do that like a mosquito can. What it does is it's like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. I'm being poisoned, I'm dying, help me. And he's like trying to wiggle himself out. And at that whole time, he could be spitting, and you could, he's dying. So he's not going to take that lightly.
Which is why I really appreciate you haven't given special attention to the angle of your fine tip tweezers, because if you come with standard fine tip tweezers, then you're basically, at higher risk of squeezing the body, because you don't have that fine angle, that curve that your tweezers have.
Yeah, straight tweezers, you could catch this part of the abdomen if you're trying to come down. Especially, I've had nymphostage ticks feed in my belly button. I've had them in my groin area, of course. I've had them in my ears, behind my ears, between my toes. They get places. And I know that people should always tuck their pants into their socks and stuff like that. But I'm telling you, these little suckers are persistent. I spent 8 hours in the woods one day wearing 8-inch Timberland type work boots with socks tied tight. I got home, and sure enough, there was an adult female deer tick feeding between my big toe and my first toe. I can't figure out how the heck that happened, but it happens. So really be careful. But follow the recommendations that everybody knows about. Stay in the center of trails, wear light colored clothing that will help you see them better. And then, of course, do your tick checks daily, and don't neglect your crevices. That's my motto here. If you're in a situation where you don't have the appropriate tick removal device, get the tick off. Just try not to squeeze the body. You can even use like a credit card to scrape it off. Again, you'll probably leave the mouth part in, but better to leave the mouth part in and get the body of that tick off than to wait till the next day when you're home, when you can get your TickEase or whatever tweezer you might have. So don't be scared about doing that. It's better to get it off less properly, but quickly, than it is to wait. So that would be a good recommendation.
This past month, I tried to remove 2 different ticks from 2 different friends on camping trips. They were both Ixodes pacificus female adults. And in both cases, it was a couple days in. Both of them ended up having to go to urgent care and have them removed there. One of them was positive for Lyme disease. They were able to test, Tick Report was able to test the parts that we did get out, and it was positive for Lyme disease, and she developed the beginning of an erythema migrans rash. So she was treated properly and is doing fine.
Quick response is important. So
yeah.
But it's also good to know the options, as you mentioned. So what do we do? So that would be number one, get that tick off properly. I actually have been very busy with designing and developing additional products besides the standard TickEase. And we have the TickEase Tick Kit, which will be available soon. I don't know if you can see that okay, but this is also answers the question, what do you do next? So after you remove the tick, again, not with heat or with any substances, you don't want to agitate or poison or do anything to that tick. The better the tick is when you remove it, you know, the more lively, the more alive, the more it looks great running around. That's how you determine that. So once you have that tick out, what you want to do is you want to save it. So you want to put it in a little Ziploc bag. It's not necessary to freeze it or to put anything else in that bag. The tick will actually just dry out in a couple of days typically. And as long as it can't get out, it's not going to be a problem for anybody. So that's the first thing. Then you just want to record some general information. Who got bit? When did they get bit? Where are they? And how long does the bitee think that tick was in for? And that information can be helpful when submitting to any type of identification service or risk assessment service. I happen to be a partner, a prevention partner with Dr. Tom Mather's Tick Encounter Resource Center down at University of Rhode Island. In my opinion, Tom has the best, most accurate tick content resources. And we've referred to his group a lot. These guys are awesome. So they have a free service, which is described in the instructions that come with the TickEase Tick Kit, that will allow you to get not only a confirmed identification of that tick. So what you do is you have that tick now in the bag. You take a good picture, a good close-up picture of it. You go to tickencounter.org. You look for the Tick Spotters tab. You click on that, and it'll walk you through the process of submitting that tick. Again, no cost, to get it fully ID'd. And then based upon the information that you provide to them, again, how long was it? Well, they'll determine actually how long it was feeding by measuring the distance between typically the scutum and the base of the abdomen. And then they'll use information, what type of tick was it? What stage of tick was it? And all that information is then compiled to say, well, Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith, you've been bitten by an adult deer tick in, New Hampshire during October. Your chances are pretty high that you have been exposed to something. So you get a category, low, moderate, or high risk. And then there are options. So what do I do? Should I send it in for testing? Should I go see my doctor? If you decide to go the route of the tick testing, you can then go to tickreport.com, which is also in the instructions here. And actually your viewers and listeners can, if they decide to use that lab, please just use the promo code TickEase, and I can save you an extra $5 off of the standard test or any test that you get. There's a few levels that you can search for within their site. So with the information now, you've gotten the tick off correctly, or as best you can. You've then gotten a risk assessment. You've then gotten your tick tested. And with this information, you can contact your physician, hopefully a Lyme literate physician, that can then tell you what to do next as far as, what to watch for, when you would expect to see symptoms if you did get exposed, and if you did get infected, and then what kind of treatment options are available.
I have two questions. One is, we tell people to keep their tick in a Ziploc bag with a moist paper towel. Mm-hmm. I know that alcohol is no longer recommended by the tick testing companies. I do still recommend the moist paper towel. So
with the type of testing that they're doing at the lab. It's a PCR testing. It's a DNA test. So they just require parts of the tick's body, and it can be, you can have that tick lying around for a year or so and still be testable. I don't know what the length of time is, but I know it doesn't kind of expire. The tick is still going to be good if you have the main body parts. The moisture I use only when I want to keep the tick alive. So because the labs don't need live ticks to test, I'm not sure it's necessary. It's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect the way the tests are conducted. It doesn't affect the outcomes. If you want, it just keeps the tick alive because they're very, very susceptible to the humidity levels.
I wonder if it would help in terms of when they send you the picture back and they've identified that it's partially fed or fully fed. I wonder if, slowing down the desiccation process might help with just the photo, identification part.
Yes, and I would agree with that because these are very old, and these ticks used to be really plump and juicy when they were first removed, and now they look like little raisins. So I agree with that. However, if you're going to get your information from the Tick Spotters Network, yes, take a picture of the tick when it's alive and when it's, as soon as you can once it's removed. Right. You can even take a picture of it while it's still attached if you want, if that's, but don't waste time, get the tick out. So beyond that, my opinion would be that it's really not necessary. You're just keeping that tick alive. And, if you leave them in the Ziploc, they'll slowly die a painful death. And that makes some people feel good. So.
Oh yeah, I have my little tick collection too. I've seen them still crawling around, for weeks.
Yeah, it depends on where you are and the humidity levels. But I find in most interior environments, with deer ticks anyway, they'll die in a few days under normal circumstances. I know there's some areas in the Southwest where dog ticks who are less susceptible to the humidity levels can actually reside in homes and crawl around inside. Not too familiar with that, but at least up here, and in the Northeast right now, we're just seeing them emerge for the fall. The adults come out because they've transitioned from nymphs to adults. And now we've had some more rain recently. It's in temperatures in the 50s. And we are starting to see them starting to wake up and come out. So I hope it's not too bad for people this year.
So my second question was, I was wondering if you could show the viewers who are watching the video your commitment to ticks in the form of your tick tattoos.
Well, I don't know. I wear this shirt around a lot. My watch goes tick, 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 tick.
Oh, it's got a tick on it.
I've got, I don't know.
Oh, a tick on your phone.
Yes, and I wore shorts just for this interview.
Oh, good. Okay.
Oh, we have a Lone Star, and that was in honor of when the Lone Stars were confirmed and established here in Massachusetts a few years ago. And then, of course, my favorite, the cute little female deer tick. So
scapularis.
Yes, and I don't know if new ticks show up, I might have to get more tattoos, but we'll see about that. So
that's a commitment. I think there are a lot of people who do not want to see ticks on their body at all. So I admire your dedication to being sort of a tick superhero and facing the enemy and just diving right in and doing everything you can to understand them so that we can work to prevent, more tick bites, more tick exposures. Right. How do you feel about using repellents? We didn't talk about that in the tick prevention segment.
Sure. No, that's certainly good information, is to let people know that, yes, you can use repellents. What I found is that as far as the DEET products, the picaridin, some of the natural stuff, I use repellents all the time. But sort of more of this topical stuff that I put on my skin, I'm not going in using those with the idea of repelling ticks too much. It's not going to hurt, but ticks are very slow moving, slow breathing creatures. There again, I use the mosquito. The mosquito flies in and says, "Oh my God, I'm on deep, fly away," and they don't bother you. So it works really well for that. But as far as a tick that's going to be kind of dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum, and they only breathe, a few times every 15 minutes or so. So maybe they don't like it, but they'll just continue to move around, and maybe they'll move up and might find a spot where you haven't applied DEET. And a lot of times that's first area that they would go for would be your crotch area, because I don't know about you, but I'm not applying DEET to my private areas. So if they just wander over it, they can get in there, and so it's not going to be as effective. But if it makes you feel better, and it does have some repellent qualities in it, so it's not going to hurt. So I would recommend continuing to use that if you use it, or start using it if you want to. But by far, permethrin is my repellent of choice. We were talking about this earlier, and actually happen to have an insect shield treated bandana that we are now going to start to sell for dogs. So this is a perfect item for dogs. It's to be used as a complement to your current flea and tick preventative, not a replacement, because ticks have to touch this in order to be affected by it. It is considered an acaricide, which means as opposed to a repellent, acaricide will kill under the right circumstances. And that means the percentage of concentration or how the application occurs on this piece of apparel, if it's done correctly, even as little as 60 seconds of direct contact can result in at least a repelling factor, if not an acaricidic factor, which means it'll eventually die. So some people do get results where the ticks can be crawling around and it can repel, but in some cases it actually can end up killing them. So again, it depends on a lot of different factors, but I'd still recommend permethrin. It's only for your clothes, and there's two ways you can get it. You can get it in a self-applying misting spray. Just follow the guidelines and the cautions on the packaging. Apply it to your clothing, let it dry completely, and then wear your clothing. Most ticks are getting on you down low, on your boots or shoes, and then your pants or your socks. So these are the first areas I would suggest treating. And then ticks will then start to climb up and find a nice spot to feed. With dogs, using that bandana, because dogs are always nose to the ground, tunneling through grass and fields and stuff. Most, excuse me, a majority of the ticks will get on face and chin and this area. So if they're exposed to it, that keeps them off the dog. And that's what we want. And because my dogs used to bring the ticks into the bed, like I said, people say, "Oh, don't sleep with your dog." Well, it's hard to look into my dog's face and tell him get off the bed. So we don't necessarily follow those rules. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that still sleep with their dogs in their beds. So I recommend the permethrin, and the insect shield process is a heat process. It binds the chemical to the fibers, and that allows for much longer lasting and much more effective product, an effective product. So this one is good for 25 washings. If you have a different type of material, it can go up as long as 70 washings. So that's pretty long lasting protective. And because it becomes non-water soluble after it dries, it's perfectly safe for humans and dogs. It doesn't metabolize as well for cats. So this product is not for cats, dogs only. And it actually will work wet. So that's those are good features of the product.
Do you know how long it lasts without being washed and keeping its potency?
Yeah, well, I mean, 70 washings is a lot. If you are washing it, I would imagine it's pretty much the life of the garment if it's not washed. But I would recommend washing it every once in a while just to get all the junk off of it if the dogs are swimming a lot, or just dogs are dirty in general, and we all know that. So we have to keep them clean.
Okay, great. Well, Are there any last things you'd like to add for our viewers and listeners?
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think the situation is just getting worse and worse. And there's like a perfect storm of factors that will kind of make the prediction of bad tick years, continue. And I really am speaking more from, my area and kind of where I am and what I'm experiencing. But I think it's applicable across a lot of geographic areas. I'm in the Boston area, so Massachusetts is my home. But, areas like Pennsylvania, Vermont, New Hampshire, I'm now seeing, Maine and other areas west are seeing a huge increase in reported cases. And that could be the result of this increase in wildlife. And there's massed years where the climate has caused the oak trees or the mast crops to be large, so acorns and nuts. And now we're having a huge bumper year of apples up here, unlike any we've seen in a long time. We've had so much rain, so that feeds more animals. And if you have more mice and rodents because of the acorns and the nut crops surviving, and you have warmer winters, all of that combined, and you have 20 to 40 deer per square mile as Ubers for ticks, and that can be, here in my yard today and 4 miles away tomorrow, dropping ticks, as I say in one of my videos, like flecks of fairy dust, like Tinkerbell would do, and each one laying at 2,000 eggs, and 5 a day. It's mind-boggling. And unless we start to have colder winters where a percentage of the population of ticks can be decreased, and less food for rodents and less hosts and less reservoirs, I don't see the problem getting any better. It actually looks worse. We have different types of ticks. We even have the scientists saying that, yeah, COVID is pretty bad, but imagine what could happen with vectors now, mosquitoes and ticks, and it could be another situation that nobody wants. So I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I guess I want to tell it like it is. So just be prepared. Use that tool chest. I can't tell you how much I appreciate what the Bay Area Lyme Foundation has been doing, and your organization's commitment to helping with research and providing information and just doing whatever it is that you guys are doing. I really, really appreciate it. And I think that more people should certainly be in tune with your program, your organization. So it's really been nice to talk with you and share some of my thoughts and experiences here.
Great. Well, we're really grateful for you, for your advocacy, for your products. And thank you so much for joining us, Tickman Dan.
Okay. And certainly if anybody has any questions or need to reach out, you can contact Bay Area Lyme Foundation, or you can contact me directly. Can I give the website?
Sure.
Yeah, it's just TickEase, TickEase.com, or you can call me directly. I promise I will answer you personally, and that's 855 Tick Ready.
Great. Thanks, Dan.
Okay. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Ticktective podcast and video series, a program of the Bay Area Lyme Foundation. You can find out more or donate at bayarealyme.org.